Tabletop Terrors, Tabletop Terrors. Hey guys, this is James from Tabletop Terrors, and Tim tagged me in the video to do my top 5 facts, RPG facts you didn't know about me, so here it goes. Number 1 is the first time that I ever played anything resembling Dungeons & Dragons. In this case, it wasn't pen and paper. I played Icewind Dale. My dad got it for the computer. He had been a big Baldur's Gate fan, and he got Icewind Dale, and I played it, and it was very difficult and really hard, and I sort of trudged through it, but being, say, 6 or 7-year-old kid maybe, I guess I was closer to 10, that was my first experience. After that, I was hooked, but I didn't really know what D&D was, and so my brother Tim was really into it. As you guys know, he's a bit older than me, so he was a teenager at the time, and he bought all the books, and he played with his friends, and that leads me to number 2, which was that I actually wrote my first D&D adventure before I ever played the game, before I ever sat down and really knew what it was like to sit around a table and play. It was an adventure about the players were led to believe that there was an evil necromancer in the ruins near a town, and it actually turned out that there was a druid that was controlling the necromancer. It was all kind of complicated, and again, I mean, I'm maybe 13 or maybe at most 15 years old at this point, and I had never played before, but that was my first adventure. The reason behind that sort of goes into, if you've watched Tim's video, our parents weren't really hot on the idea of us playing Dungeons & Dragons. They were under the impression that it was really bad, or that we shouldn't, and that it might be bad for us, so I had to sort of sneak into my brother's room and read his books, and he would download all sorts of different things on the computer about Dungeons & Dragons, and I would read them, and I was very excited to play. I made my own characters, again, all in the middle of the day while he was at work or doing something else, and I'd sneak into his room and I'd take his books and I'd roll up my characters or just read the Dungeon Master's Guide, and I tried to take in everything I could about it. That leads into number 3, which is I was actually, again, well, maybe I had played it maybe 1 or 2 times at this point, but I played in Living Greyhawk, which, for those of you that may not know, is, well, it was where people get together. This was the first time I played with people I didn't know, and one of the first times that I ever played, maybe 3rd or 4th time, and you get together with people you don't really know, and you play these pre-made adventures that take place in a world that sort of is ever-changing. So while the world changes, you know, whatever changes they make in it sort of apply to you and your group as you go through it. That is probably a really bad explanation of it. I don't remember it entirely, but what you could do is and I think you can still do this, is you can become a dungeon master, an official dungeon master for Wizards to run these official, you know, these Living Greyhawk games. And I actually was able to do that. You go online and you take a test. It's like 10 questions, and it's fairly difficult if you don't know the rules of the game, but at one point I knew how many athletics checks it would take, or I think it was called balance at the time, balance checks it would take Lydia to get across a pit that was 30 feet long, edging across a 6-inch, or edging rather on a 6-inch ledge. I no longer know that. I now play a lot of 5th edition, and I haven't played 3.5 in a very long time, but there was a time where I could answer 10 questions about Dungeons & Dragons and potentially DM a game. One of my first characters, this is number 4, one of my first characters, as surprising as it sounds, was a drow. Furthermore, it was a bard drow, which I thought was a really clever concept. Tim actually helped me with it. He was DMing at the time, and we were playing, and I really wanted to do something unique, so I had 2 really cool things. One, I had a whip. While whips don't do very much damage, I think at the time it was a 1d4. I used a whip and a rapier. The whip I was able to use to grab enemies and pull them or make them prone, which was really cool. And my other favorite part was my brother and I came up with this concept for a drow instrument that was sort of covered in strings, sort of like a harp but smaller, and it made really terrible dissonant sounds that the drow were fond of. And the really cool part about this is any of the strings could be taken off to be used as a garrote. So it was almost, I was a very roguish sort of bard. My favorite part about that is Tim, we were in an encounter, and Tim had us fighting these, I believe they were like floating monsters with some tentacles. I don't remember exactly what they were. But one attacked me, and I failed my save, and all of my hair fell out. So not only was I a drow walking around in the overland, as cool as that was, but I was bald, and he made sure that he made a lot of the NPCs that we dealt with laugh at me for that, and I thought it was pretty clever too. And that actually brings me to number 5, and I think this is kind of interesting. When I first wanted to play D&D, Tim didn't actually want to play with me. Now, I certainly have to qualify that because it's a little unfair just to say. The idea was I was pretty young, he was a little older, I guess it's not to say that we didn't get along, but I was young and he was a teenager and a little older, and he wanted to play with his friends, and I always wanted to sit in when they'd play. And he would, every once in a while, he would get the chance, after my parents were a little better, you know, years after he was playing, they would all sit in his very small room, all cramped around a coffee table they put in there, him and his buddies, and they'd be playing, and I would just sort of sit by the door and watch them play, and he basically said as long as I stayed quiet, I'd be allowed to. But he didn't want me to play with him. You know, I was his younger brother, and I was probably embarrassing him in front of his friends, and all I wanted to do was play Dungeons and Dragons. But as you guys know, now we're here, and we play together as much as we can, and we just have a ball doing it. So those are my 5 facts about RPGs rather. They were all about Dungeons and Dragons for me, but 5 facts about RPGs that you guys may not have known. I am not sure who I'm going to tag yet, but I wanted to get this video out of the way. I was having trouble with the tagging, so I will put them in the post. I'll post this in the RPG Brigade, and I'll make sure it's clear there. But yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed it, and you learned some interesting things about me that you probably didn't want to know.